Hi guys, hope everyone's well and welcome back to the Improvement Podcast. So today I wanted to touch on when to finish a dieting phase. And the reason being is a couple of my clients recently have wrapped up their dieting phases for different reasons. And I thought it would be good to discuss why you may potentially want to wrap it up, or basically how do you know if it's the right time to stop your dieting phase. There's different considerations to obviously make. It's not just about how lean you are. Although that's obviously a big consideration, but it's not just about am I lean enough. There's other things that will go into it that will influence if it's the right time or not to wrap it up. And for different individuals, there'll be different periods or times that are right for them. For example, someone who wants to maximize muscle growth, the most important thing there would be not personal preference, it would be what's optimal for my progress. Whereas someone who's just trying to, stay fit and improve how they look a bit, that's obviously going to be a different goal, because their goal's not getting themselves into a great position to perform well. It's being able to be in a good position to feel good about themselves, if that makes sense. And if you're not pushing your body weight up afterwards, then you could maybe say you don't have to get as lean, that sort of thing. But jumping into the episode, the first thing to consider when it comes to if you should continue your dieting phase is adherence. So how is your ability to stick to your diet, your steps, and what you're currently doing? Because if, let's say, you're having no problems at all sticking to it, things are in a sustainable level and you're sticking to the plan fine, then why not keep doing it? However, if it's unsustainable, then you might want to wrap up. That can be a reason, because everyone's got a different ability to stick to the plan, and if, let's say, you're not sticking to it, you might just be spinning your wheels. You may be, something I see a lot is people spinning their wheels and driving their calorie intake lower and lower. What I mean by this is they're consistent for a period and you're working hard, they're dieting away, and then they fall off track because they can't stick to things for whatever reason, and then they gain the weight back fast while they're off track, and then now their weight's up but their maintenance calories are lower, because basically when you diet, when you're trying to strip off body fat, your body adapts to whatever you do, so that drives your maintenance calories lower and lower. So then when you do go off plan and you do have a lot more calories, you're basically in a surplus. So you're basically doing a slow and steady diet, driving your calories lower and lower, and then being in a really aggressive surplus over the days you're off track. And then people repeat that cycle, but being in yes, you can work your calories up, but not by having a couple days or a week or whatever, just having a extreme amount of calories and having a lot more than you did previously when you were dieting. Because if you are wanting to build your calories up, it takes time. It takes time gradually eating more and increasing your calories when your body basically asks for the increase when your weight stops moving, and then you can nudge your calories up and keep repeating that if you're wanting to basically start eating more and keep your body composition. But that requires consistent training with it. So if you're falling off track and then having a blowout and then trying to get on plan again, you're just driving your calories lower and lower, which is a big issue I see. So being able to stick to the plan is obviously a big factor, because adherence is key for getting results. If you can't stick to something, you're not going to get results. So that could be a good reason to wrap up the dieting phase. Maybe spend time at maintenance, or spend time just getting a mental break from dieting, or maybe try and do a very, very, very gradual bulk just to work your calories up and reverse out your diet. But obviously this depends, how consistent are you going to be working your calories up and training hard, or also what's your current body fat levels, depending on if you're wanting to gain muscle or not as well. So as well as adherence, how's your body composition and have you reached your end goal? So maybe a bit of obvious one, this one, but have you reached your body composition related goals? And this is more if you're not looking to bulk, and like I said, you're just more lifestyle which is your main concern when it comes to dieting. If like your goal's not to gain maximum amounts of muscle, like how are you feeling in regards to how you're looking? Because if, let's say, you might be like relatively lean, but what's your end goal? There's nothing wrong with, let's say, continuing a diet when you're lean enough to gain muscle effectively, if your goal's just to push yourself, because it's rewarding, and that's why most individuals do it, or some individuals do it, to get the enjoyment out of the process, because it gives them a sense of satisfaction and reward being able to push themselves. Or in my case, that's partly why I do it. And so if, let's say, you are like relatively lean, just because you're in a good position to gain muscle doesn't mean you have to. You can still just keep chipping away body fat if your goal is to push yourself and see how far you can go, if that makes sense. So that can be a reason to keep on doing so. And also, like I said, what is your end goal? Have you reached it? Because if your goal's already hit, and you might be with a coach and they might want to keep dieting, then you're not going to be able to stick to the plan very well if you're already happy with where you are and you don't want to keep going. There's nothing wrong with calling it quits there as well. Your goals are your own goals at the end of the day. But yeah, basically, have you reached your own body composition related goals? Are you happy with the progress you've made? In terms of why you might want to end it there, just nip it in the bud, is if you keep going, you might diet to an unsustainable level where hunger's really high, you're finding it hard to stick to your nutrition on a daily basis, and then when the diet ends, you could gain a good 3 kilos back just because you pushed yourself too far, because maybe your coach wanted you to. You pushed yourself over the limit, and then you couldn't stick to finishing the diet, and then you gained 3 kilos back, which could have took you 4 weeks to lose, maybe more than that, maybe 6 weeks to lose, you don't know. So it's like you could have just stopped at the 3 or 6 weeks earlier or whatever, and not had that rebound, and just stopped it when you're at a sustainable place. Which is also something I see, because reversing out of a diet or leaving a dieting phase is just as important as the dieting phase itself if you're wanting to maintain your results long term, or maximise what phase you're going in next if you're looking to slowly gain weight afterwards, or in other words, bulk. And something else to consider is, if, let's say, your goal like long term is to build muscle, but maybe you're doing a dieting phase to tidy things up a bit, to just be in a better position to build muscle. Let's say you bulked and you were a bit too fluffy, you thought, right, I'm not really seeing much definition in my abs, I'm not happy with how I'm looking. Let's say your hunger's really low, and it's just you're not really benefiting from having more food or pushing your body weight up further. You're not really seeing the value in it. Then from there, you may want to then diet, of course. And in terms of that dieting phase, what you're looking for if your goal long term is to build muscle is setting yourself up for a good runway to push your body weight up again. For example, if you're like, let's say you bulk to 90 kilos and you class yourself as fluffy, you've not got any abs, you're like, right, I'm a bit too fluffy, I need to pull back. You don't really want to pull back down to, let's say, 88 kilos, because then you'll be gaining for like 6 weeks and then you'll have to pull back again. You want to make sure you're giving yourself plenty of room to push your body weight up for a long period, a long duration, plenty of runway, in other words, like I said. So if you're in that position, being relatively aggressive and giving yourself plenty time to basically gain. So stripping a lot of body fat off while maintaining performance, and giving yourself a good runway. And this is more of a looking at it from a productivity point of view and not how you feel about your appearance if you're looking to do so. But basically, what you want to make sure is you've got room to push your body weight up, you've got good digestion from pulling back, your hunger's nice and high so that you've got room to basically eat food for a long period of time, and also you don't want to diet you want to consider obviously your body fat level. How much do you think you'll be able to push up after stopping the dieting phase? Because you want a decent period to be able to push your body weight up. And the reason being is because the more time we can spend pushing our body weight up, the more time we're in a position to gain muscle effectively. Whereas if we're at maintenance and we're in a deficit, more so in a deficit, then we're not going to be in a good position to push our body weight up. So we don't want to be spending much time in a deficit. Not that you can't progress, because you definitely can in a deficit, but for the most part it's not optimal. It's not what we're looking to do. So for the most part we should try and stay away from like a diet and be in a position where we're performing best most of the time. And in terms of when to finish a dieting phase as well, if your goal is to enter a gaining phase after, you want to basically strip as much body fat off as you can without harming performance. Because let's say you are getting to the stage where you're performing really poor in the gym, you're losing your strength pretty excessively, then what's the point of that dieting phase? The point of the dieting phase is to set you up to gain muscle tissue. So if you're putting yourself in a position where you're losing muscle tissue, then you're not really, that's kind of counterproductive. So yeah, make sure you aren't like pushing that far. But saying that, I don't think most individuals are, and I think for the most part the problem isn't you're pushing too far in terms of getting too lean. I think most individuals' problem is they're not consistent enough outside the gym in order to retain their performance. So next up, is pushing more going to be counterproductive to your goal, whatever your goal is? And some considerations is, like I said, will you see if you push yourself too aggressively, push yourself too low, diet for too long? Will you have some sort of like a binge after? For example, if your hunger is really high, you're driving your calorie intake lower and lower, what's going to happen after that dieting phase? Because as I touched on earlier, it's all good losing that additional 3 kilos, but if we're putting ourselves in a position where we'll gain that back a week after because we've restricted ourselves too much, we've pushed ourselves too hard, then there's no much point in doing so. A good analogy I like to use is it's like a pendulum. It's like if the pendulum swings one way, the harder you swing it that way, the harder it will swing the other way, if that makes sense, because it's got the momentum. So the pendulum swinging one way, let's say you push it to a certain bit, that basically is that's representing how much we're digging in a diet, and then swinging the other way is basically the impact of digging deep in the diet. It's gonna basically have a bit of backlash potentially, so consider that. Next up is muscle loss. So again, if consistency is not there to retain muscle tissue, then there's no point like continuing the diet phase if you're not in a position where you can tick the boxes you need to tick. For example, if let's say you're in a period in life where, like, let's say stress is high, let's say you've got exams, or you've had a child, or things, or work's absolutely hectic and your sleep's all over the place, you can't get all your sessions in, you can't handle your stress very well at that moment in time, then there's no good performing a dieting phase or continuing a dieting phase in that position. Because like I said, if your goal is like to build muscle or have a good body composition, even, because having muscle is just as important if your goal is body composition related as if your goal is to have a good level of muscle mass, because it affects how you look, simple as that. So if the consistency is not there to retain your muscle and to diet effectively and retain strength in the gym, then it's probably not a good idea continuing it. So that could be a good idea, calling it quits there. So make sure your life circumstances are in a good spot. Also, just if, let's say, your general population, if you've got, I feel quite rude saying general population, if let's say you've just got like general fitness goals, or nothing extreme like stepping on a bodybuilding stage or competing in some sport or that, if let's say you just don't want to diet during a period, like there's no need to diet during a holiday or during Christmas if you don't want to. It's like, it's your choice, and there's no reason to suffer and do things you don't want to do. So what's going to ultimately make you happiest? and be best for yourself. And saying that, the opposite applies. Just because people don't like dieting during summer doesn't mean you can't if it's what's going to bring you happiness. At the end of the day, do what makes you happy, if that makes sense, and do what you think's best for yourself and what you want to do. But yeah, consider those variables, like where things are at, if it's the right time, if it's in line with what's happening in your life right now, because that could be a good idea to call it quits. Because again, if you're going to try and diet during crazy life events and you've got a ton coming up, it could be an idea to just to finish the diet up and start like eating more gradually and gaining, so that when you do have things like, let's say if you've got a wedding coming up or parties, it means when you do go to them, you've got a decent level of calories so you can enjoy them, and so that you don't gain a lot of weight because your calorie maintenance is higher from working it up beforehand. And something else to consider is it having a negative impact on other aspects of your life? Because when you diet aggressively, when you get really lean, it can, like, not that everyone is trying to get really, really lean, but how's like your energy on a daily basis? How's your day-to-day happiness? Is it worth the reward from pushing that bit further? Have you got anything to prove? Like, if let's say you're content with how you're doing, you don't need to keep dieting just because your coach wants you to. Like, if you're in a spot where you're content with your results, and you're content with your results at the end of the day. And I always ask my clients for their input, like how are you happy with where we're at now? It's like, what do you want to do? Because at the end of the day, if someone's heart's not in it, then there's no point pushing them further, if that makes sense. So in that scenario, then I'll say that. I'll say this might be optimal on paper. Let me know how you're feeling. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll give them a goal short term, in terms of, let's say, right, 2 weeks left, we'll keep digging, the finish line's there, and then they are much more consistent because they can see the timeline, they can see the time frame, they can see the light at the end of the tunnel, which is something that's actually helped me during prep as well. It's like when I know, right, I'm gonna start eating up into my next show, I know, like, right, I've only got 3 days to dig and pull this weight off, and I find it easier, and I'm kind of like wanting to do the steps. I'm like motivated to do it because I know the end is in sight. And the other thing is your work and studies. So if it's having a negative impact on your work and your studies, then that could be a good idea to call it quits. For example, if you're dieting and let's say you are pretty lean, you're the leanest you've been, and you're just feeling really, really tired, you're trying to improve your sleep quality, you're trying to have a coffee and things like that, and do what you need to do to have good energy, but you're still just finding the negative impacts are there, then you could call it quits if long term it's not going to be worth it, because you don't want to be, let's say, having a detrimental effect on your university or that, because that's obviously going to matter a bit more long term. And in terms of something else to consider is not everyone has the ability to diet in one stint or in one go. Like, for example, if someone's not ever bulked before, some people, like I've said, go through the cycle of trying to diet, they fail, they try and diet, they fail. If that's you, then you might have a really low calorie intake, and from there it's hard to diet further. It's like, if let's say your steps are really high, you have really low calorie intake, you're already training 5 times a week, and let's say you're doing cardio on your rest days, it's like, unless you're trying to get on stage, then for like just a general standard diet, then you've not got much room to push. It's like there's not much room to keep digging and keep dropping food, because your food's already really low, your expenditure's really high, you've got no tools to use, you've got no tools in the toolbox now, you've used them all. So sometimes it's a good idea just to be at maintenance, maybe to try and start gradually adding calories. Like, if you want a figure, it's like weight train 5 times a week, train really hard, try and progress on a day each time you're in the gym, and add 50 calories each week, and look what your body weight does. Your body weight won't go up a lot, you'll have much more energy, you'll perform great, and then you'll be in a much better position. If you do that, let's say you add 50 calories and you do that for an extended amount of time, this is just me giving you a rough figure, so don't take it with a pinch of salt. But if you do that and then you do that for like 12 weeks and you diet again after that, you won't be knackered from dieting, you will have much better performance, and as a result more muscle. You'll be in such a better position to just diet, and your body will be nice and sensitive to chipping away its calories, and you'll drop easier. But again, if you're wanting help with doing so, then feel free to fill in an application form and I'll happily help. So we quick shameless plug there, not something I do often, so allow it. Hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please leave me a rating and review, and let me know if you've got any questions or any specific topics you'd like me to cover. And yeah, share it on your story if you did enjoy it, and if you are listening to YouTube, subscribe, leave a like, that sort of thing. I appreciate everyone's support as always, and hope everyone is doing great.